Hey guys, so today I wanted to make a wrap-up video for all the books that I read in May and June, because I made a wrap-up video for April and I really wanted to make one for June. What month is it? July, June, May. I don't even know where the fuck I am. But you know me, I'm unorganized and it just didn't happen. Whole month of June, I couldn't get the May wrap-up to happen. So we're making it happen now, and considering that I only read one book in June, I'm just gonna throw them together. 4 books in May, 1 book in June. We're gonna talk about them now. So the first book that I read in May was The Outsiders by Se Hinton. So I read this book for the first time in high school. It follows this boy called Ponyboy Curtis, and he lives with his 2 older brothers, Darry and Soda Pop. Both of their parents have died, so the older brother Darry is kind of like the parental figure for the boys. This book follows 2 gangs. There's Socks, which is short for the Socials, and they're the West Side kids. And then the other gang is called the Greasers, which are the East Side kids. The Socials are like really preppy. The Greasers are kind of described as being like rough and tough, kind of like degenerates. Ponyboy and his brothers are part of the Greasers gang. So Ponyboy is the youngest one in the group. He's really smart, does really well in school. I think it's kind of insinuated that like out of all of them, Ponyboy has the best shot of like making something of himself in the future. So there's so much that I could say about this book. Like, I understand why it is studied in schools, and I'm not going to dive into all of the themes and like some super deep analysis. So any like 15-year-olds that came here thinking that I was going to help them write their essay for them, like, I'm not going to get into it. It is very interesting though. One thing that I really like about this book is the concept of found family. Most of the boys don't have really strong family connections, so they kind of band together and the group becomes like a surrogate family for them. I think the story is really gritty and authentic. It explores a lot of different themes like division by social class, coming of age, friendship, as well as the concept of self-identity in regards to, I guess, the expectations or restrictions that are set upon us by society, family, and friends. Very good book. If you haven't read this, I would highly recommend reading it. It's really interesting. You know, Se Hinton was like 17 years old when she wrote this book. The book that I read was Snow Falling by Jane Gloriana Villanueva. So this was written by a ghost writer, clearly. So if you don't know the show Jane the Virgin, so basically the main character in the show, Jane, she's writing a book and it gets published. This book is supposed to be the book that Jane wrote. By the way, I think the way they marketed this book was genius. The fact that they timed the release of this physical book with the release of the book on the show. I love shit like this. I love when you're really invested in a TV show. Something like a book is mentioned in the show and then they make it like a physical real thing that you can buy. I love that. I think Parks and Rec did that as well with the Pawnee greatest town in America. Yeah, so anyway, back to this book. This was like the worst thing I've read in quite a while. I really regret reading this book. It's like a recap of season 1 but set in the 1900s. I refuse to believe that this book is anything other than a joke on purpose. It has to be. I don't know what I would do if it wasn't. They're parallels of characters on the show. So Josephine is clearly Jane, Martin is clearly Michael. So the main character Josephine is in a relationship with Martin. He's a detective. They're talking about getting married and everything. And they're talking about like waiting till marriage. Basically the way that this book, because it's set in the 1900s, the way it tried to like work its way around the concept of Jane being accidentally impregnated with IVF. Josephine sees Martin in the distance with some lady and they hug, I think, and then she puts her head on his chest and Josephine freaks out. Oh my God, this cheating bastard. Instead of confronting him or asking him about it, she's really passive aggressive to him the next time they speak, doesn't bring it up at all, and then that night goes and sleeps with the owner of the hotel she works at, and she ends up getting pregnant from it. And then it turns out that that woman was Martin's new police partner. That was like just some fuckery that I didn't really enjoy reading right off the bat. But also it's set in the 1900s and there were so many times throughout the book where they would reference things that just like weren't invented until at least 50 years later. Again, like, I know this book is meant to be bad on purpose, but oh mate. The character Josephine really just made me want to walk into the ocean with bags of cement tied around my feet. She is the worst hypocrite, and she's just like super unlikable as a character as well. Also, the writing was just not that good in the terms of they would say the same lines over and over again. It became so annoying. I don't know. I really liked the show, so I thought I would really like this book as well, and I just didn't like the book. Yeah, so in conclusion, it was a mistake. So the next book that I read in May was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I've had this book for a very long time. I'm actually so mad at myself for not reading this any earlier because it's fucking brilliant. This is like one of my new favorite books of all time. It just had everything that I like in a story. The writing is so good. I actually met Angie Thomas. She signed my book for, I don't remember what event it was for. Actually, I'm pretty sure I have a vlog. Yeah, I made a vlog on my channel. Yeah, I got to hear her speak. They were having a discussion about diversity in literature. She's also a super lovely person. Anywho, back to this book. Let me first start by saying I read this book like 1 week before Ahmaud Arbery was murdered. And then it seems like straight away after that, George Floyd's murder happened. And then we started to see the Black Lives Matter protests sweeping America and then the world, which are still going, by the way. Like, protests are still happening. They're just not reporting on it, but these protests are still going, guys. It's not over. It's absolutely not over. So, you know, that being said, it's so incredibly important for us to be continuing to educate ourselves and don't just turn a blind eye and remain ignorant because racism and police brutality don't affect you, or it's not something that you're confronted with in your day-to-day life. I know there are some people, you're not confronted with it, so you don't think about it, and that's not good enough. I've shared a lot of links on Instagram and Twitter. So of course I'll be sharing links in the description box of this video too. And that also includes how you can support Indigenous Australians because this is not just America's problem. So yeah, everything is below. So The Hate U Give is a book about a black girl named Star Carter. And she's living in like a low socioeconomic black neighborhood. She goes to a private school in like a really rich white neighborhood. So this story kicks off when Star witnesses her childhood best friend Khalil get shot by a police officer while he was unarmed after being pulled over for a broken tail light. And it follows all the fallout after that with the media's portrayal of Khalil, the protests within the community that follow. This book was written in such a way that just completely sucks you into the story. Like, I know while I was reading it, I felt so immersed in the story. I'm not gonna spoil anything. Actually, you know what? Spoilers if you haven't read the book, just wait till this picture goes away. I think it's really important that we didn't get a really fluffy, upbeat, happy ending and that everything kind of worked out the way we want it to, because I feel like that would really take away from the message that this book is trying to send, which is that black people are being targeted and killed by police. And they're not getting any justice for it. These police officers are getting off scot-free. This book is just so good, not only with the themes and the plot, all of that aside, the characters are just written so well. They're all very multifaceted. I think the family dynamic is great. I think the way Angie illustrates Star's everyday life living in her neighborhood is really great. I really would strongly recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it. So the next book that I read was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This is another book that is own voices, just like The Hate U Give. This takes place in a fantasy Nigeria, I believe. It follows 3 perspectives, Zaylee, Amari, and Inan. In this world, there are 2 types of people. So there's diviners and then people who don't have any magic. So these are people who are born with the ability to one day become magi, people who can perform magic. Basically, all of the magi people were wiped out like a decade ago. So people can still be born as diviners, but they just can't ever turn into magi because magic was banished. Diviners are distinguishable by their really white hair. So Zaylee's a diviner. The other 2 characters that we follow, Amari and Inan, are the prince and princess of Orisha, which is the name of this fantasy land. Their father, the king, is the one who banished magic and has since oppressed and enslaved a lot of the diviner people. The characters all had really distinct voices. I never got confused with whose perspective I was reading from at any given time. But yeah, they were all very different from each other and they all brought something different to the book. My only complaint, the pacing is quite slow, which put a little bit of a damper on the reading experience because I think this is mainly attributed to the fact that there are 3 different perspectives. We read one section from one perspective and then we read basically the same thing from another perspective. That's one thing that got quite repetitive. And I think honestly, maybe if there was just less chapters with Inan, like we didn't have to have that many chapters with him, I think. Also, the romance was just not good, in my opinion. Super forced, came out of nowhere. So yeah, it didn't make any sense and it was like borderline cringe. I really liked Amari's character growth and like I didn't really like her that much in the beginning, but I really liked her by the end of the book. She had really great character development. Inan's character on the other side, just I'm kind of confused with like where his character went. It seemed like the point of his character was for there to be lots of growth with him. It just didn't happen. Like it happened and then it like undid itself, and I'm so confused. Yeah, I don't know, it's like he came to his senses and then he relapsed back into his old ways. Overall, I really like this book. It's a bit hard to read at times. Still, it's a story that really gets your blood boiling when you think about how this translates to real life and real history, because essentially this book's main theme is institutionalized racism. Institutionalized racism. Okay, let me fix the lighting. It's getting... Oh, well, that just helped a lot. So June was just like not a very good month for me in general. So I didn't really read a lot. I read one book and that's good enough for me. The book that I read in June was Afterworlds by Scott Westerfeld. This is a book that I have had, it's been sitting on my shelf, on my TBR, for like 6 years. It feels so good to have finally read it. So even though it took me a whole month to read, I still feel so accomplished. So this is a book about an 18-year-old girl called Darcy Patel. Just sold her book to a publishing agency and she's moving to New York. I guess she's moving there for the rewrites. It's basically following her year leading up to the publish date. This book is really unique in the way it's written. Split up into 2 different types of chapters. So as you can see, so all of the white chapters are following Darcy's perspective and all of those black-lined chapters are the book that she's writing, if that makes sense. So Darcy's book is called Afterworld, and it's like a paranormal romance, I guess. So Darcy's book is about a girl who is able to cross over from real life into the afterworld. It's like an in-between from real life and the underworld. It's like limbo, I guess, or purgatory. This happens when she has a near-death experience. It happens at like first chapter of the book. That's not a spoiler. Yeah, she has this near-death experience and then it turns her into a psychopomp, which is like, it's a human who isn't a ghost, but they have the ability to like hop between realities. She can also see and talk to ghosts and help them cross over. So it's quite a difficult concept to grasp at first, but as you go through the book and learn more about it, it's really interesting. But I think what really makes this book is those 2 stories coming together, because they do intersect in various ways. Things that are happening in Darcy's life end up affecting her story, of course. So it's really interesting to see aspects of Darcy's life materialize within her book. I wasn't like super fond of the character Darcy, to be honest with you. I think she came across as very immature. Like, I know she's only 18, and when I was 18 I was a fucking idiot. So like, I'm not really one to judge. I just think she's like thrust into this life that she's not like ready for, to be honest. The publishing company gave her a huge check for this book. And it's really like painful to read about the way that she's just like pissing it all away. So I kept thinking that that was gonna be something where like she'd eventually run out of money and that would be like a huge issue. But it never happened. So I'm like, why write about her being super irresponsible with her money? It doesn't even bite her in the ass. Like, she's not unlikable by any means. I just mean like, I didn't really resonate with her. So this book also features a female-female romance. I think it's really cool that that's not like the main focus of the story. There's like the main story and then that's just like an extra thing about her character. Overall, I think it's a really interesting concept for a book. I think if you're an aspiring YA author, or if you're just an aspiring author who likes reading YA, I think you would really like this book. So that's everything that I read in May and June. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of those books and what your thoughts are, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.